So now we're looking at lessons with word problems, and I know this is the part that everybody hates about math class, and I understand that. But if we don't start them understanding them now, it's going to get only worse. So here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to look at little details, to talk about these problems as much as possible, to take notes, to highlight, to do whatever they need to understand the problem before they get started. And then once they understand the problem, it actually shouldn't be all that difficult to keep on going. So today's lesson is about extra information or hidden information, and we'll talk about both. So in this first one, we start just reading, and one thing they like to have them do is just take notes on what they're doing. And so what we'll do is we'll just start by taking notes as we read it. So it says Emma solved 9 math problems and answered 7 reading questions. So we're going to write down Emma's name. So we're taking notes here. She solved 9 math questions and answered 7 reading questions. Now I'm going to point out right now, and I don't know what your teacher did, but in the book, I noticed that they say to do 9M and 7R just so that they're writing less. The problem with that for me is as we get on to the higher levels and we're into algebra and all those things, that M means a variable and these are not variables at all. So I would prefer actually that they write a little bit of the word instead of using just a letter, just because letters stand for variables instead of just notes. So I'm going to write out 9 math and 7 reading. Okay, then it says her sister, so now we have another person, her sister solved 8 math problems. Notice they don't say anything about reading problems. And this is something to talk about. Like, what do you notice is missing? Because we're taking notes, it's kind of obvious that there's no reading here. And then the question says, how many math problems did they solve? Now, if this was homework, one of the things I would have them do, besides writing down these notes, is I would have them circle the question, because the question tells us so much. Okay, so we have all this information. We have how much Emma did, we have how much her sister did, we have that they're doing math and that Emma's doing reading. Okay, so we have all kinds of information. Some of it we need, some of it we don't. And so if we look at the question they asked, the question, and again, this is so important, what is the question? I still do this in the upper level grades. What is the question that they're asking? They ask how many math problems did they solve? So if I go back to my notes, what I don't need is I don't need to know how many reading problems Emma did. Okay, we can cross that off. And it's a good idea to actually go and cross it off. So we cross off the reading problems. And then we go back to the question, how many math problems did they solve? Okay, so Emma solved 9, her sister solved 8. And so the idea is, are we adding or subtracting? What kind of math are we trying to do? Are we putting them together? Or are we comparing and saying that Emma did more and how many more did she do? And the idea is, how many did they solve? Says we're putting them together. So then they should go 9 plus 8 equals 17 math problems. And we always like to label what we're doing just so that everybody knows what our answer stands for. So we have 17 math problems. Okay, so this is where you have extra information. You don't need it all. You can cross it off. Okay. The other thing you can have them do is you can have them do something called highlighting. And so with highlighting, what you're doing is you're taking, and as you read, instead of writing down the notes, which I really prefer the notes, but if you have a really stubborn one who doesn't want to write notes, they could go through and they could highlight. So Emma has 9 math problems and 7 reading questions. Okay, so imagine I'm highlighting instead of circling. Her sister has 8 math problems. How many math problems did they solve? And so now if I ignore what I don't highlight, I see that I have Emma, 9 math problems, 7 reading questions. Sister, 8 math problems. Okay, and then again, this again is so important. What's the question? The question says how many math problems? And so then we can go back and say, well, I don't need that 7 reading questions. So we can cross it off and just look at Emma has 9, her sister has 8, so then we add them together just like we did there. Okay, the other thing that we looked at in this section was hidden information. So here I have an example. Samuel has 16 horseshoes in the shed yesterday. Today he put a new set of horseshoes on his horse Betsy. How many horseshoes are left in the shed? Okay, so if I take notes, we've got 16 horseshoes. Okay. Now, he put 1 set on his horse. Okay, so here's the hidden information. Oh, sorry, let's look at the question. How many horseshoes are left? Okay, so the fact that they said how many are left means I'm going to subtract. I'm going to write that down just because, as we're looking at this, it's best, even if you just talk about, are you adding or subtracting? Understanding, are they putting things together or taking things apart? This is the big deal. This is a big deal to ask, because the more you ask it out loud, the more you discuss it, then the more likely they're going to do that in their head when they are doing their homework or doing a problem on their own. So the more you talk about it, the better it is for them, that it becomes a habit for them. So if we have 16 horseshoes and we are going to subtract because they're asking how many are left, are we subtracting 1? And if we were not careful, we would actually subtract 1. But notice it's not one horseshoe, it says one set of horseshoes. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what is one set of horseshoes? If you're putting them on a horse has 4 legs, which means 4 hooves, which means 4 horseshoes. So we actually have to take 16 minus 4 to figure out what that is. So 16 minus 4, and we get 12 horseshoes left. Okay, so once again, the question is probably the most important thing to point out, because that's telling you what you're looking for. If you have hidden information, you need to analyze it. We can't just fly through a word problem. We actually need to take time on it and figure out what we're doing. So in your homework on the front page, you are doing just that. You want to write down your notes. I would suggest over on the right where it says show your work, write down your notes, cross off anything that's extra, or write down your notes. Make sure we circle our question, write down our notes, and then if we have something hidden or not exactly obvious as to what the number is, figure out what that means and reword it, rewrite it so that you have that number in there. On the back, on the remembering, your roundings. So that wasn't too long ago where you round to the nearest, and so you look at the next number and you say, is that a 5 or bigger? We round up, or is it less than that and we stay the same? All right, good luck.